Hello, this is Joe from Nerd in Korea. We are continuing our deck check-in series, and this time we're looking at Sefris of the Hidden Ways. This deck sucks, okay? So usually I do good decks. I thought I'd switched up and talk about a deck that I actually built a few years back, and I was going through it and I was like, wow, this is not good. I think the idea behind the deck is a solid one, but yeah, the kind of execution was terrible. Yeah. Anyway, so I'm going to look at the mistakes I made and why I made them and how I kind of try to fix it. So the next video is actually going to be on this deck, but the fixed version of this deck. So what's all this? Again, we'll be over what to do with a we'll be going over what to do with a bad deck, basically. So looking at how to evaluate cards in the deck and for the deck and how to kind of fix it. So in the next video I am going to go over the fixed deck, as I said, the better one, and the links for both are posted in the description. Okay, so I'll put both of those in the description. What to do with a bad deck. Okay, so you kind of have three options, I think, with a bad deck. Junk it. Okay, take all the good cards out and put them in other decks. Junk it may sound like a bad option. It's actually a pretty good idea a lot of the time. If something is just not working, maybe you gotta go all the way back to formula to make it work, or you built it horribly bad. Just get rid of it. Put the cards that can go in other decks and keep moving. Back to formula. Take the deck apart completely, identify key pieces, and rebuild it. So this is extreme. This is basically starting from square one, right? This is not what you want to do, basically. Find the problem cards, identify where improvements can be made. That's what I'm doing. So here, I'm doing this option number 3. I'm identifying the not so good cards because I do like the idea of this deck, and I'm putting in things that actually make sense to make sense. So what was I thinking? The idea behind this deck is solid. I do like the kind of concept here. So this deck has one main thing I look for in a budget deck. It makes use of a mechanic that people don't like. So if you want to build a really cheap budget deck, I mean cheap and budget maybe are interchangeable, but even by budget standards cheap, look for a mechanic that people don't like. That's going to have all kinds of real value there. Another thing, I made the party deck, and people don't like the party mechanic. I don't understand that one. I think it's great. I love that. Anyway, okay. So this is a deck that is all about underpowered mechanics on the surface, but it's actually about sneakiness and evasion. So this is really an evasion deck that, yeah, kind of on the, if you look on the surface, it looks like it's a dungeon deck. It is, but it's really an evasion deck. So that's why I kind of like this idea. So this uses the dungeon mechanic and initiative, which we'll take a look at more, or sorry, we'll take a look at more next. I am going to look at which cards do not fit the deck and see what can be done to fix it. So a lot of these cards are cards that do use the mechanic. I think there's not a lot of cards where I looked at them and then it's that doesn't just fit into the deck at all. A lot of these do actually kind of on the surface look like they should be in the deck, but they just don't quite cut it, kind of thing. So yeah. Anywho, the deck price for this one, again, this is the bad one. Don't buy it. It's $38.21 as of making this PowerPoint. It's probably changed now. It changes so fast. The design objective, take as much advantage of the dungeon mechanic as possible. So the dungeon mechanic, especially with initiative and evasion, work very nicely together. So that's kind of what I was going for. This is determined using the TCG market value price. The shipping cost on TCG is very high apparently. So if you want to actually get this, use Card Kingdom instead. It will be more expensive for the deck, but the shipping costs will be so much less. I'm still using TCG player market value just because like I've been doing it for so long that kind of wouldn't make sense to change it now, unfortunately. And yeah, you can check the deck on moxville.com. Again, I'm posting in the description. I'm posting both the decks, this bad one and the fixed one. The fixed one ended up being cheaper. What? Okay, so part 1, Sefris of the Hidden Ways. So this is looking at the deck mechanics and the commander. This is very important to consider, particularly in this video, because we're looking at how to fix the deck. So the deck mechanic is what really you need to focus on here. Okay, so the dungeon and initiative. Dungeon is a recent mechanic that was interesting but underpowered on release. This led to its unpopularity. I really do like dungeon. It's hard to interact with because you do kind of keep triggering things. And usually not by just doing things you normally do. So two things I really like to see is the easy trigger and triggered by things you just normally do anyway. Initiative was added later to try and fix it, which I think adds a lot of functionality. So yeah, the initiative works kind of like Monarch, where if you have it or you get it, you advance. So if you have it, I think, is it at the end of your turn, you advance to the next thing in the dungeon, next room in the dungeon, and yeah, if you get it, you advance to the next room in the dungeon. So it could potentially be used by other players as well, but yeah, you're going to get the most use out of it. Also, with evasion, with a lot of evasion, you can just keep getting that initiative. So that's what it really kind of, where the real value is. So there's a very nice variety of cards that make use of this mechanic that are low cost for their functionality. Again, people don't like this mechanic, so it's much cheaper than it probably deserves to be. Okay, so the dungeon is a card that exists outside the game. Actually, there's 4 dungeons, so yeah. But you can only do 1 at a time. Not as part of your deck. Again, this does not count against the number of cards in your deck, so that's kind of a nice thing. You may start any of the 3 original dungeons with the Venture into the Dungeon card. Initiative cards allow you to enter the Undercity, a separate dungeon. So there's basically the new one is the Undercity. You do need your Venture into the your Initiative to be able to go into that, and yeah, the Venture into the Dungeon is for the other 3. Once you've started one of them, you can use anything to keep advancing through the rooms though, okay? That's just to get into the dungeon in the first place. Yeah, if you are already in a dungeon, you move to the next room, gaining whatever bonus is listed. So every time you go to a new room, you're going to get another different bonus, and sometimes you have options about which room you go into, so you can decide which bonus you want at which time. Very nice. So after the final room, the dungeon is completed and is exiled. You may begin another or repeat the same dungeon after that. So you can keep doing the same dungeon over and over and over if you want to. You can. There are also a lot of bonuses attached to different creatures or different cards for completing a dungeon. Usually a lot of them will have things like you'll get this bonus, and if you've completed a dungeon, you get an additional bonus. Or if you complete a dungeon, you get an additional bonus. Venture into the Dungeon is listed on cards. Initiative works differently. It's more similar to Monarch, as I said. If you take the initiative or begin your turn with it, is beginning your turn, sorry. It will automatically move through whatever dungeon you are in, so you'll move to the next room if you start your turn with initiative, or you get initiative during your turn. That moves you to the next room, so that can be very helpful. Only combat damage may be used to cause a player to lose initiative. Initiative is a status, not a token, emblem, or permanent of any kind. Again, it is a status. It's represented by a card. That does not mean you can remove it from the game. It's a status. That means there's no real way to get it out of the game once it's in. It just keeps it will keep bouncing around players, but there's no way to just take it out altogether. So what? Okay, the idea of this deck is simple. Essentially, it is an evasion deck that gets extra value from moving through the dungeons as quickly as possible. So yeah, this kind of is all about the evasion more than the mechanic. So it's kind of a weird one where usually your main mechanic is the focus and the secondary things support that. Here, the kind of secondary thing is the main thing and the main mechanic supports it. So it's kind of backwards for most decks, which is something I think a lot of players won't expect. So yeah. Evasion allows the deck to keep taking the initiative and easily continue the value train. So you're just going to be able to, if you don't start your turn with the initiative, you can pick it up pretty easily is the idea. So yeah. Sefris of the Hidden Ways. Again, he is Esper. I really love Esper as a tricolor as well. So again, there's white, blue, black. Alright, so he costs 3 mana, he's a 2/3. Not bad, not great. Whenever one or more creature cards are put into your graveyard from anywhere, venture into the dungeon. This triggers only once each turn. So every turn, remember, every turn, not round, turn. So if someone takes out one of your creatures on their turn, this triggers, right? You still get this. You can get this 4 times per round in a commander game. Create Undead. Whenever you complete a dungeon, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Straight to the battlefield. Doesn't matter how much it costs, doesn't matter anything like that. You can just take any creature you like and boom, straight back in. You're probably going to be able to trigger these dungeons you're going to get a few of these. So yeah. This recursion isn't super reliable, but it's probably going to go off more than once, I think. Anywho, 31 cents only for him. So again, people don't like this mechanic, so it's cheap. Okay, and one thing that is a boon for this commander is its color identity. Again, Esper is great for this type of deck. Being sneaky and like just kind of getting a lot of like recursion and things like that. Again, Orzhov loves recursion, Dimir loves being sneaky, and you basically got both of them in there. So, Azorius is always nice too, but anyway. Okay, so this commander is all about keeping you moving through the dungeon. Losing creatures to blocking may end up working in your favor. So this is I think it's an interesting commander because it is kind of like losing creatures benefits you in a way. So if your opponents are noticing that, they might say, oh, I don't know if I really want to attack this person because if they block and lose a creature, it gives them more value, right? So whenever you complete one, you are going to recur a creature to the battlefield. Again, that ability, especially if you're able to keep setting it off by blocking, that's going to make people really hesitant to attack you. It's a better disincentive than I think a lot of things. People think like pillow fort strategies are really good. It's a hassle, but it's like I think this potential recurring a creature from the graveyard to the battlefield is worse than like paying 2 mana to attack with a creature. I would rather pay the 2 mana. So yeah. Part 2. Okay, so the bad cards. This is all about fixing the deck. Alright, so what do we do to fix this deck? I made several additional changes and I need to do more, but this is what I was able to do with the cards I had on hand. So I did actually do this. All of the changes I made were with cards I actually had on hand. This is a real deck I do have in just the other room over there. So yeah, this is not like a hypothetical exercise here. So I focused on cards that may actually look like good includes in the deck, but ultimately were not. Most of these, I think that they're on the right track. Like they're not terrible as far as like conceptually, they're not that bad. Just in practice, I think they're lacking somewhat. Okay. So replaceable cards in this deck fall into two categories. So A, focus on the mechanic but are far too ineffective. This, I think, is something when you're building a deck and focusing on the mechanic, you can get kind of tunnel vision and end up putting in things that do have the mechanic, but just don't really do anything for your deck. Or don't do anything for the core mechanics. So other ones are potentially good in the deck, but like aren't quite on point, I think. So any deck is going to have a fair number of cards that aren't like specifically about the mechanic, right? You've got mana rocks, you've got all kinds of things that probably won't directly relate to your core mechanic. Having them at all is not a bad thing, but they should somehow work with the deck, all right? Or work with the deck better than what I was doing. Ineffective cards. Okay, A. So, Passageway Seer for 3 and a black is a 2/2 with lifelink. So first of all, 4 mana for a 2/2 with lifelink, not great. So when it enters the battlefield, you take the initiative. That's right there why I included it. It's because more ways to take the initiative. It's nice to have that because it means you also don't need to like actually do combat damage. You just take it automatically. If someone else has it, you can just swipe it from them without even having to do anything else. That is nice, but it's not, doesn't do a whole lot else. At the beginning of your end step, if you have the initiative, put a +1/+1 counter on Passageway Seer. So this is going to get bigger, 1+1/+1 each turn. This will add up, but at the same time, it's like, okay, I guess if you keep it down for like 3 turns, you've got a 5/5 lifelink. That's not bad. If I had some like proliferate or something in the deck, it could go very well with that, but like I don't, so meh, right? Just, it's not a terrible card, but yeah, in this deck it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Dungeon Descent. Okay, so it's a land you can tap for a colorless or pay 4 and tap it to untap or tap an untap legendary creature you control. Venture into the dungeon, activate only as a sorcery. Remember, if a land says you pay 4 and tap it, you're not tapping that land for mana. So it's 5 is what it's costing, and you gotta tap a legendary creature to move 1 room. It's just super expensive for what it does. I think even if it was like 2 and tap, I would still be on the fence. 4 and tap, I don't know what I was thinking. And a legendary creature. This is too much, I think. Shortcut Seeker, again, 3 in a blue. So, okay, whenever it deals combat damage to a player, venture into the dungeon. It's a nice ability. It doesn't have any evasion, first problem. And, yeah, 4 mana for a 2/5 with like pretty much nothing else going on. If you've got some easy way to give this evasion, maybe, but even then it's triggering once per turn. You can venture into the dungeon 1 time per turn. Lackluster, to say the least. Feywild Caretaker. So this is one I actually had some hesitation taking out. It's 4 and a blue, so the cost for a 3/4, 5 mana is a lot, right? And when it enters the battlefield, you take the initiative, so that's kind of nice. And at the beginning of your end step, if you have the initiative, create a 1/1 blue fairy creature token with flying. The reason I really liked this is because that 1 creature per turn, that's not great, but that's what you're going to use as your blocker to be able to keep triggering your ability. So anytime a creature dies, you get to adventure into the dungeon. So you're basically using this as like be able to like keep blocking and losing them to just keep moving through the dungeon. So that's kind of like the defense / dungeon thing. This card, if it even costs like 4 mana instead of 5 mana, it might still be in there, but 5 mana for really something that is maybe not even going to be that useful. Yeah, it's not there. It's got the, it's got all the pieces of like a good card, but it's just a little under there. Okay, replacements. Vicious Battle Rager for 3 and a black is a 1/5. Again, sounds not great. When it enters the battlefield, you take the initiative. Whenever it becomes blocked by a creature, that creature's controller loses 5 life. Okay, so this is one of the cards in the deck that does not have evasion, but really it makes more sense to let it through than to block it. So there's all kinds of things that you can do this to like set up other things. If you've got instants like to surprise people with, this is a great card because they'll look at it and be like, yeah, I'm not going to block that because taking the 1 damage is preferable to losing 5, right? The take the initiative thing is nice. I'm almost more in it for the automatic losing life on blocking. I think it's kind of hilarious. Broker's Hideout. Okay, so this is not on. This is not in the actual mechanic at all. I love this card though, and so when it enters the battlefield, sacrifice it. When you do, search your library for a forest, plains, or island card. Put it onto the battlefield tapped. Then shuffle your library and gain 1 life. Okay, so again, you don't want the forest. Basically, you want the plains or island, right? Plains or island. So you're just getting, it's mana fixing. Getting 1 life, sure, but mana fixing. It's all about that. Plague Drone. This is one that I ordered a few of because I feel like this is one that's going to sneakily go up. Anyway, 3 and a black for a 3/3 flyer. If an opponent would gain life, that player loses that much life instead. This is just switching off so many like life gain decks, or like if you've got someone who always plays like a vampire deck or something. This is just turning off their deck. Any lifelink deck. Okay, go ahead. Do that. You're just basically draining yourself out and you lose the game because of all your like lifelink shenanigans. This is just like an amazing counter card. I think it fits in a lot of decks, and it does just the fact that it turns off other decks. It's a really good thing to have. I would order some more of these. I already did, but yeah. You should order some of these while they are cheap. Stick Together. So 3 white sorcery. Each player chooses a party among creatures they control, then sacrifice the rest. This deck does have a lot of like rogues. It has wizards. It has all kinds of things that you even warriors. You're probably going to end up blowing up some of your own stuff, but you can at least save some of your creatures. Pretty sure the commander is a wizard. Excuse me. Also, there's definitely cleric in there as well. So yeah. The potential for you to have a decent, at least 3 creatures left on the battlefield after this board wipe is definitely real, and I think it's much less likely anyone else is going to have it. The Do Nothing cards. Okay, so Quiza, Augur of Aegonies. I think this would be an interesting commander to build. I should build it as a commander. So again, it's Esper, 1 Esper for a 3/4, so cost 4 for a 3/4. Whenever you draw a card, target opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. I think when I put this in, what I was thinking was that it is doing damage for like drawing cards. I'm not drawing a whole lot of cards in this deck, so definitely you want to pair this with heavy card draw and other effects that do damage with card draw. This doesn't. It doesn't make sense in this deck. It's not a bad card, and it kind of has the evasion aspect, but it just isn't there. Fairy Formation. Okay, 4 and a blue for a 5/4 flyer. Okay. And you can pay 3 in a blue to create a 1/1 blue fairy creature token with flying. Draw a card. That's actually very, very good, right? This is another thing I would consider ordering a few of just to have them kicking around. It's expensive, 3 in a blue, to make a 1/1 fairy and draw a card. The card draw is actually quite good on an ability, right? This is not tap. As long as you have mana, you can just keep doing this. So I would look for a deck where you're like reducing ability costs and really get a whole lot of value out of that. The 1/1 flyers are nice for blocking and stuff, but what you really want is that card draw. Again, if this deck had some kind of ability cost reduction, this would be a fantastic card, but it doesn't, so it's not. Animate Dead. Okay, so... okay. Take target creature from any graveyard, put it directly into play under your control with -1 attack, -0 toughness. Treat this creature as though it were just summoned. If Animate Dead is removed, bury a creature in its owner's graveyard. Again, for 1 and a black, that's a pretty good... I think this is like a $5 card. I think it was more, and then I got them and the price dropped, because that's what happens. Anywho, it is a good card, but what's it doing in this deck really? This is all about evasion. It's about like not having to take other people's creatures out, so having something that pulls their creatures out the graveyard, it probably is going to be useful in the game, but does it make sense in the deck, right? Diabolic Tutor. It's okay. 4 for a tutor. We can do better than that. Bloodthirsty Blade. This is one I actually had some hesitation about taking out. Again, it costs 2 and then 1 to attach. And equipped creature gets +2/+0 and is goaded. So that's what I was thinking right there, is like goading a creature and giving it a bonus means it's attacking my other opponents and it cannot attack or block me. Right? If it's always attacking, it's always tapped, it's not going to be, it's not blocking or attacking you. So it does make sense in the deck, but like, if taking the goad thing, one of the main advantages is the whole like, it's tapped down. So, kind of doing evasion, so do you need it? Not really. Okay, so it's again a good card. I want to get into a deck. I keep almost putting this in decks and then not doing it. Replacements. Your temple is under attack. This card is amazing. It's just so good. 2 and a white for an instant, so creatures you control gain indestructible until end of turn. Everything is just indestructible. So counter to those board wipes, or be able to like make your attacks without any kind of worry. Just really good. Strike a deal. You and target opponent each draw 2 cards. Political. This is like a great political card and also like a great response card. Just the uses for this are crazy. Yeah, you do have to let someone else draw 2 cards, but you can easily like kind of wheel and deal that into some kind of advantage for yourself. So for 3 mana, drawing 2 cards in white is just crazy. Esper Panorama. Again, this is all about just getting those lands. You can pay 1 and sack it to get a land for mana fixing if you need it, or you can just tap it and use it as colorless. If you have your mana already sorted, or your mana base already sorted color-wise, just use it as colorless. It is similar to Evolving Wilds, but it's what's really nice is that you don't have to sack it. It does cost mana to sack it, but you can just use it for mana right away if you want to do it that way. So it doesn't have to do that. Unearth. Okay, return target creature card with value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Also cycling 2. Most of the creatures in this deck are mana value 3 or less. So you're probably going to be able to get something and throw it back in the battlefield with this. And it's only 1 mana for this. Just very, very useful. And if you don't have use for it, cycling. Cycle it. Fine. Illicit Shipment. Okay, this is more expensive than Diabolic Tutor, but it gets 2 cards instead of 1, right? It's 1 more mana, double the cards. It does have Casualty 3. So as you cast the spell, you may sacrifice a creature with power 3 or greater when you do copy this spell. So you need a creature you can sacrifice. There's a good number of those in here. And search your library for a card, put it into your hand, then shuffle. Basically, this is going to be tutor out 2 things. You do have to pay 5 and sacrifice a creature with power 3 or greater. Not that difficult, and you can definitely set up your win cons with this. A tutor that gets 2 cards is still just crazy to me. Finally, Prowler's Helm. So equipped creature can't be blocked except by walls. Do you play a lot of decks that have walls? Or a lot of walls anyway? I sure don't. Won't be hard to kind of boost your evasion into like just unblockable with this. This is such an oddball thing. Again, if it's a flyer and then you give it this, probably it's just evading everything, right? So especially in combination with other forms of evasion, I'd be shocked if they had something that would be able to kind of deal with that. So this has been Sefris of the Hidden Ways. This deck sucks. Hopefully you've got some ideas or ways of looking at decks and evaluating them from this. Again, next week we are looking at the fixed deck, the actual, I think, much improved deck. So we'll look at how to play that. Anyway, take it easy.